The footage stutters to light on a smartphone screen with the unmistakable cadence of an AI voice clone. The voice is heavily filtered with artificial static to mimic mid-century radio broadcasts. And it claims to belong to Admiral Richard E. Byrd, the legendary American polar explorer. As the synthetic voice describes a lush green land beyond the ice, populated by prehistoric mammoths and highly advanced flying discs. The video cuts to heavily doctored Google Earth coordinates, zooming in on what appears to be a massive, glitching geometric structure buried deep in the snow. Within hours, the video amasses millions of views across TikTok and YouTube. The comment section devolves into paranoia. Users demand to know what the global militaries are hiding. They ask if anyone has recorded the edge of the ice wall. They speculate about subterranean alien bases, ancient Atlantean pyramids, and a global government lockdown preventing independent exploration. To the normal person, this looks like some entertaining internet content. But these digital artifacts are parts of decades-old mythology. Antarctica is the ultimate blank state. It's a sprawling white void at the bottom of the world. The vast amount of people will never step onto the continent. And where there is a void, people naturally project their anxieties and fascinations into that void. Today, that void is weaponized by social media algorithms that prioritized engagement over truth. And it's been cross-pollinated with flat earth theories. And of course, all of these claims are BS. To debunk these claims, you have to strip away the digital noise. You have to look at the realities of the southernmost continent. The truth about what lies beneath the ice is far more compelling than the fiction. The true story of Antarctica involves catastrophic asteroid impacts, ancient cartographic blunders, and a bizarre cast of 20th century hoaxers who successfully invented stories that millions of people now accept as historical fact. The resurgence of the Antarctica conspiracy is driven by social media platforms, where the concept of an impenetrable ice wall has become the story. The flat earth community asserts that Antarctica is not a continent at the bottom of a spherical globe, but rather a towering ring of ice that circumscribes a flat earth, acting as a retaining wall for the oceans. Legitimate researchers find their content hijacked by these theories. Dr. Peter Neff, who is an ice scientist, frequently posts videos detailing the logistics of drilling ancient ice cores. His TikTok account is supported by the National Science Foundation and features footage of daily life in the extreme cold. Yet, the algorithmic response often counter-programs users with viral videos claiming that independent travel to Antarctica is illegal, physically blocked by shadowy government agents. This paranoia feeds off a genuine geographical feature that has awed mariners for over a century, the Ross Ice Shelf. For early explorers and for modern satellite imagery viewers, the edge of the Ross Ice Shelf looks like an impenetrable planetary boundary. It covers over 500,000 square kilometers, and the shelf is the largest of its kind on Earth. Where the ice shelf meets the open waters is the Ross Sea. It forms a nearly vertical wall of ice towering 15 to 50 meters above the water's surface, stretching over 600 kilometers in length. Below the waterline, the ice plunges hundreds of meters deep, reaching thickness of up to 1,200 meters near the grounded continent. The shelf is fed by a constant grinding flow of glaciers draining from the east to the west and Arctic ice sheets, advancing outwards into the sea at a rate of 3 meters per day. When amateur internet sleuths scour Google Earth for evidence of a conspiracy, they encounter strange visual artifacts near these massive ice formations. These people frequently post coordinates showing massive glitching black holes or perfectly circular visual anomalies near the poles. And to the untrained eye, primed by an AI voiceover, these are undeniable proof of a massive cover-up or an entrance to the inner Earth. The reality is a limitation of the ability to track satellites in the area, because imaging satellites use polar orbits that don't cross directly over the geographic poles. There's not a lot of footage from the highest latitude. Satellites travel north to south, but there is a slight inclination angle as the Earth rotates underneath them. They never reach the exact 90-degree mark before rounding the corner. The resulting images used by Google Earth feature distinct circular blurring and fragmented textures where the software struggles to stitch together the incomplete photos. The digital stitching error is presented to millions as a military cover-up. But the obsession with mapping a hidden temperate Antarctica didn't start with Google Earth. It began 5 centuries earlier on a piece of preserved gazelle skin. One of the pillars of the Antarctic conspiracy is that the continent was mapped thousands of years ago by an advanced civilization when the landmass was completely free of ice. Primary piece of evidence for this historical revisionism is the Piri-Reis map. Drawn in 1513 by Haji Ahmad Piri, who was an admiral and cartographer in the Ottoman Navy, the map was discovered in 1929 at the Topkapi Place in Istanbul. The surviving fragment displays the Atlantic Ocean, the western coast of Europe and Africa, and a distinct elongated landmass curving horizontally off the southern tip of South America. The map was just a historical curiosity until 1965, when a professor at Keene College named Charles Hapgood published his book of maps of the ancient sea kings. Hapgood hypothesized that the Piri-Reis map depicted a subglacial Antarctica. He claimed that the Ottoman cartography was based on much older source maps handed down from the highly advanced lost prehistoric civilization that mapped the globe before the last ice age. Hapgood mistakenly believed that Antarctica had been completely free of ice in 1700 BC and remained partially ice-free as late as 4000 BC. Hapgood's theory received a boost of credibility when he got a letter in 1960 from U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Harold Z. Ohlmeyer. Ohlmeyer stated that the map's lower features reasonably matched seismic profiles of the Princess Martha Coast made by the Swedish-British Antarctic expedition in 1949. This letter became the holy grail for fringe theorists. Writers like Eric van Daniken and Graham Hancock repeated Hapgood's claims to argue for the existence of ancient astronauts, flying saucers, and a civilization destroyed by shifting poles. However, reality dismantles Hapgood's hypothesis. George McIntosh, who is the leading historian of cartography, analyzed the Piri-Reis map and exposed the flaws in the advanced ancient map narrative. McIntosh points out that Piri-Reis map is actually far less accurate than other 16th century maps. Hapgood achieved his supposed matches by heavily manipulating the map, altering grids, and assuming original source errors to force the geography to fit his preconceived theory. The concept of an ice-free Antarctica on the map is a distorted depiction of the South American coastline. The boundary of the map bent sharply to the right because Piri-Reis ran out of room on the expensive piece of gazelle skin. To fit the remaining South American coastline onto the material, he simply warped the geography to run horizontally. The continent contains drawings of llamas, animals exclusive to the Andes that were completely unknown in Europe at the time that the map was drafted. The map evidence proves Piri-Reis drew South America, not Antarctica. But to destroy Hapgood's claim that Antarctica was ice-free in 4000 BC, researchers had to look deep beneath the continent's surface. The proof of Antarctica's historical climate is written in the ice itself. Through massive, deep drilling projects, scientists have extracted continuous ice cores that act as an unbroken chronological record of the Earth's atmosphere spanning millions of years. As snow falls on a glacier, air becomes trapped between the microscopic fingers of the snowflakes. As more snow accumulates, the immense weight compresses their lower layers into solid ice, sealing these air bubbles. These bubbles are time capsules of the past atmosphere, containing the exact concentrations of carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases present when the original snow fell. Projects like the European project for ice coring in Antarctica and the Russian drilling at Vostok have retrieved ice cores reaching depths of over 3,000 meters above the bedrock. In March 2025, samples representing the oldest ice ever extracted left Antarctica aboard the RV Laura Bassi. It was transported to the Alfred Wegener Institute in Bremerhaven, Germany. Analysis confirmed that the ice samples were more than 1.2 million years old. The data proves that Antarctica has not been free of ice for millions of years. No human civilization existed on a temperate Antarctica landmass because human beings did not exist millions of years ago. Yet the myth of an ancient habitable Antarctica mutated into a new politicized form during the mid-20th century, culminating in an internet obsession with secret Nazi bases. The belief that Adolf Hitler survived the fall of Berlin and fled in a submarine to a highly advanced subterranean base in Antarctica is one of the most resilient conspiracy theories of the post-war era. And the myth points to a very real documented historical event, the 1938-1939 German Antarctica expedition. A man named Timothy Green Beckley provided extraterrestrial and hollow earth components that define the modern Antarctica conspiracy. The center of this mythology is Operation Highjump, an enormous United States Navy expedition to Antarctica led by Admiral Richard E. Byrd Byrd in the winter of 1946 and 1947. Conspiracy theorists heavily rely on Highjump as a crucial inciting incident of the modern cover-up. They allege that the operation was a heavily armed covert military invasion. According to the lore, the American Armada was utterly decimated by Nazi-piloted flying saucers, forcing Admiral Byrd to flee in a panic, humiliating retreat to the United States. To substantiate this crazy story, theorists frequently point to the so-called secret diary of Admiral Richard E. Byrd, and this document supposedly details Byrd flying his plane into a massive hidden opening at the North Pole, entering a lush, sunlit subterranean world called Agartha. The diary claims Byrd encountered prehistoric animals and received a stern warning from a highly advanced peaceful beings about humanity's recent use of nuclear weapons. And of course, this diary is a complete fabrication that was made decades after Admiral Byrd's death. The hoax was heavily propagated in the late 1970s and 80s by Timothy Green Beckley. Beckley was a self-proclaimed Mr. UFO and publisher of over 200 books on the paranormal through his company, Inner Light Publications. Beckley was a master myth maker. He founded the UFO Investigators League in the early 1970s, and he recognized the financial potential of blending historical figures with fringe science. Beckley used classic tropes of 1950s science fiction to craft the diary's story about advanced beings warning humanity about nuclear war. The Hollow Earth theory itself is a recycled pseudoscientific concept dating back to 1692, when astronomer Edmund Halley suggested the Earth might consist of concentric habitual shells. By the mid-20th century, pulp magazine writers like Richard Shaver were publishing widely popular stories about malevolent underground races called the Darrow and peaceful ones called the Terra. Beckley simply took these stories and attributed the underground exploration to a famous deceased military hero who could not defend his reputation. The diary was sold through mail order pamphlets like The Missing Diary of Admiral Richard E. Byrd, cementing its place in conspiracy lore. Operation Highjump was officially called the Navy Antarctic Developments Project, and the actual purpose was rooted in the escalating tensions of the early Cold War. By the summer of 1946, the American public and military brass were suspicious of the Soviet Union. The U.S. military realized that any future conflict with the Soviet Union would likely involve combat in the extreme cold of the Arctic Circle. Operation Highjump was designed as a massive training exercise to test how military personnel, ships, and mechanical equipment would function in brutal polar conditions. The task force was unprecedented in scale, consisting of 13 Navy ships, 4,700 men, and dozens of aircraft. They established a base camp, Little America 4, and underwent extensive aerial reconnaissance, mapping over 1 million square miles of previously unexplored territory to expand American map-making dominance. There is no retreat from an invisible enemy, only the planned withdrawal before the onset of the lethal Antarctic winter. Yet the massive military footprint left by Highjump provided fertile ground for the next major conspiracy, the myth of the Antarctic Treaty lockdown. A cornerstone of modern flat Earth and Antarctic conspiracy is the argument that the Antarctic Treaty of 1959 is a highly enforced military blockade. Proponents argue that a shadowy global coalition guards the perimeter of the continent, preventing independent explorers from venturing inland to discover the truth. And this theory fundamentally misunderstands logistics of polar survival and international law. The Antarctic Treaty was drafted in response to a chaotic scramble for territory and escalating nuclear tensions between global superpowers. The treaty, which was signed in Washington, demilitarized the entire continent, establishing it as an exclusive preserve for peaceful scientific research and international cooperation. Under the treaty, the establishment of military bases, the testing of weapons, and the disposal of radioactive waste are prohibited in Antarctica. However, there's sort of an interesting paradox going on here. Military action is banned, but the extreme environment of Antarctica requires heavy military logistics to survive. The treaty explicitly allows military personnel and equipment to be used to support scientific research. When independent researchers operate on the ice, they are supported by the capabilities of military organizations, which operate heavy aircraft, deep water icebreakers, and supply chains to keep the research stations viable and to keep the scientists alive. The idea that a unified military force patrols the Southern Ocean to shoot down civilian explorers is absurd. Having a massive invisible blockade in the world's most hostile environment would require resources that don't exist. If a rogue nation or independent group attempted a takeover of Antarctica, the primary defense would not be an armed response, but a blockade of their supply line. Without a continuous resupply of fuel and food, food, any military on the ice would quickly starve to death or freeze to death. Under compliance with the demilitarized clauses, Article 7 of the treaty grants consultative parties complete freedom of access to conduct unannounced inspections of any facility, ship, or aircraft in Antarctica. The continent is accessible to civilian tourists. The International Association of Antarctica Tour Operators sees civilians visit the continent annually. These tour ships are routinely subjected to environmental inspections, but no one is being shot out of the water for approaching the ice. They are required to avoid introducing invasive species or dumping raw sewage. It seems reasonable. In 2016, a satellite image circulated across social media platforms showing a massive, perfectly symmetrical pyramid structure protruding from the Antarctic ice. And instantly, viral networks declared that a lost civilization of aliens or Nazis had constructed a pyramid matching those of Giza in the deep freeze of the South Pole. The structure in question is in the Ellsworth Mountain, a sprawling 360-kilometer long mountain chain located inland from the Rhone ice shelf. Leading experts debunked the pyramid myth. The structure is not a man-made structure. It's a naturally occurring geological formation known as a Nunatak. A Nunatak is a rocky mountain peak that protrudes through an ice sheet or a glacier. The geometric perfection of the Antarctic pyramid is the result of millions of years of violent natural processes known as glacial erosion and freeze-thaw weathering. First, snow accumulates in bowl-shaped hollows on the side of the mountain, which are known as cirques. As the snow compacts into a glacier, the ice freezes tightly into the bedrock. When the glacier shifts under its own immense weight, it violently tears away chunks of the mountain in a process called plucking. Over millions of years, multiple glaciers eroding the mountain from different sides caused the hollow cirques to converge, forming sharp, knife-like ridges. When three or more of these cirques intersect at the summit, they carve out a perfectly defined pyramid peak known geographically as a glacial horn. The Matterhorn in the Swiss Alps was formed through this exact same process. Because the sides of the Nunatak are extremely steep, snow and ice can't accumulate on them, leaving the dark, bare rock exposed in stark contrast to the surrounding white areas, creating an optical illusion from above. There are no pyramids in Antarctica, only the brutal, patient geometry of ice and time. If the ice core data proves that Antarctica has been frozen for millions of years, how do the conspiracy theorists justify their claims of a hidden tropical Greenland beyond the pole? They point to the existence of Antarctic oases. The most famous of these oases is the Schirmacher Oasis, located on the Princess Astrid coast in Queen Maud Land. It is a 25-kilometer long, 3-kilometer wide plateau of exposed, ice-free rock dotted with over 100 freshwater lakes. Among these is Lake Untersee, one of the deepest and clearest lakes on the continent, harboring ancient microbial mats that offer a glimpse into the early Earth ecosystems. To a conspiracy theorist scanning satellite imagery, a massive stretch of brown rock and liquid blue water in the middle of a frozen wasteland looks like the entrance to a hollow Earth or the remnants of an artificially heated bunker complex. The reality is a fascinating study in extreme microclimates and solar radiation. The Schirmacher Oasis is kept free from snow year-round by a constant localized winds that sweep down from the high polar plateau. It blows the precipitation away before it can accumulate. Once the dark 600-million-year-old bedrock of the East Antarctic Shield is exposed to the sky, a thermodynamic feedback loop begins. The dark granitic and metamorphic rocks have a very high thermal conductivity, allowing them to absorb heat. The absorbed heat warms the rock, melting any remaining ice at the contact points and raising the surface temperature of the ground higher than the surrounding air. The ground surface temperatures in the oasis can be 2 to 7 degrees Celsius warmer than the air purely due to the intense solar heating effect. This localized warmth sustains a fragile, specialized ecosystem of mosses, bird species, including snow petrels, skuas, and Wilson's storm petrels, which nest in the warm, rocky crevices. It's a stunning biological anomaly, but it's not tropical. It remains a frigid polar desert governed by the brutal laws of thermodynamics, wind, and rock. There are no lush forests, no hidden mammoths, and no entrances to a hidden world. Antarctica remains the ultimate mirror for human paranoia. The reality of the continent is profoundly more awe-inspiring than any fabricated diary or internet conspiracy theory. The continent doesn't need to hide ancient aliens or secret militaries to be fascinating. It's already the most extreme alien landscape on Earth. The true mystery is not what lies beneath beneath the ice, but why we were so determined to invent monsters to live there. Please subscribe to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Please like and share this video. If you'd like to support this channel, you could become a member of this channel. I would appreciate you considering that. You can also support me by continuing to watch my videos, liking my videos, commenting on my videos, hitting the hype button on my videos, and I do really appreciate you watching my videos. And please stay spooky.